Good evening, councilors. Tonight I present to you a balanced city appropriated budget of a little more than $406 million for your consideration. We look forward to working with you over the next 3 nights as we review each city's department's budget with you. Any discussion of Brockton's FY18 budget must begin with the budget for the Brockton Public Schools. Due to a third consecutive year of essentially level funding of Brockton's Chapter 70 local aid to education by the state, our schools face a $16 million deficit in order to provide a level services budget. While the state's contribution to education this year is only a minimal $300,000 increase on a $171 million allocation, it's important to note that the city has increased its allocation to net school spending by $2.6 million. The city has stepped up and done its share. Our total net school spending appropriation is $700,000 above the contribution required by the foundation budget. However, even though we are putting in more, the schools are receiving less. The single biggest hit we're taking on our state aid to education is the deduction for charter school tuitions. This year, that is a $12.2 million deduction right off the top from our Chapter 70 funding. Those dollars never make it to Brockton. That deduction is $5 million more than it was a year ago. There are other factors as well, including $6.6 million in pay raises to BEA members last year, a total of $8 million in raises amongst all school employees, counting all of the collective bargaining units. Those raises, combined with over $8 million in raises last year, are unsustainable while we are being level funded by the state. Using round numbers, over $16 million in pay increases over the past 2 years at a time that our Chapter 70 local aid, which represents about 80% of our school funding, has remained essentially level. A couple other factors to also be aware of. The city was able to control the increased cost of health insurance this year through successful negotiations with the PEC representing all of the city unions. Agreed plan changes will save the city about $2 million on our health insurance costs this year. So this year's health insurance costs only increase by about 2% instead of the anticipated 5 or 6% market-wide rate increases. We appreciate the union's cooperative approach to control costs, keeping in mind that these changes were agreed to in lieu of the city joining the GIC, which could have potentially saved the city even more money, but provided our employees inferior coverage. The concessions on health insurance were in no way related to the current budget deficit. That seems to be a little bit of a misconception right now, that the concessions on health insurance that were negotiated with all city unions, not just the schools, were in return for the city's commitment to not go to the GIC. Brockton remains one of only a handful of municipalities in the Commonwealth whose health insurance is not in the GIC. So we very much appreciate the cooperation. I think it has allowed us to realize substantial savings, a couple $1 million in this year's budget, but we should be well aware that those concessions in the health insurance by all of our unions, that was in return for us not going to the GIC. Those concessions were in no way related to the current school department budget deficit. Remember also that the city's contribution to school costs is more than just our net school spending allocation. In fact, in this year's FY18 budget, you will find about $14 million in additional school funding, including nearly $9 million for transportation and $3.7 million to Southeastern Regional School District. As a city, we are doing the best we can to fund our schools, plus more. Relief must come from the state, where we are not being fairly reimbursed for our special needs students, our low-income students, or our English language learners. In 2015, the legislature commissioned its own foundation budget review. The commission released its report in October of 2015 with a series of recommendations. Implementing any of these recommendations would mean more state education dollars coming to Brockton. However, to date, the state has not even adopted one of its own recommendations from that commission last year. At the request of the superintendent of schools and the Brockton School Committee, the city solicitor's budget for FY18 includes additional funding for outside counsel so that the city of Brockton may join several other gateway cities in pursuing an equity in education lawsuit against the Commonwealth. On the city side of the budget, we are facing substantial challenges as well. Councilors, you'll recall that back on September 7th of last year, I shared a correspondence with you from the city's CFO with regard to a nearly $5 million assessment from the Brockton Retirement Board for the city's pension costs. Last year, in FY17, the city paid $18.7 million into the pension fund. This year, the city's cost will exceed $23.3 million, a 25% increase of $4.7 million. That increase reflects higher projected retirement benefits due to salary increases over the past 6 years, coupled with investment returns on the fund that have been much lower than projected. This money is due and payable on July 1st. We have no option other than to pay it. And without an offsetting increase in revenue to cover this payment, I have no alternative than to recommend applying the full Prop 2.5 increase to the tax levy. In fact, with the dramatic increase in pension costs, a modest increase in health insurance, and an additional $700,000 in school funding above the required minimum, we face $7 million in increased expenses this year before even looking at the rest of the budget. Despite small annual increases in state unrestricted local aid, Brockton has never recouped approximately $8.5 million lost in local aid annually when the state discontinued 2 additional local aid programs back in 2007 and 2008. I am pleased to report to you this evening that despite the continuous underfunding of Brockton's local aid by the state and the dramatic increase in the cost of retirement benefits, we will be able to maintain essential city services without layoffs. Public safety remains our top priority. This budget allows us to maintain recent staffing levels on the Brockton Fire Department while continuing our gradual rebuilding of the Brockton Police Department. When our 12 newest police officers enter the academy in September, we will have 200 police officers, our highest staffing level since 1987. No one believes that laying off firefighters or police officers is a good idea. Councilors, I would also like to bring your attention to a couple of key line items in our water and sewer budgets. In the FY18 water budget, you will see that the City of Brockton will make $7.6 million in payments to Aquaria this year. All but $1 million of that $7.6 million paid to Aquaria is in fixed costs that we are contractually obligated to make, even if we do not draw a single drop of water. However, it's clear that the days of not drawing any water from Aquaria are over. Under an administrative consent order with the state's Department of Environmental Protection, Brockton is required to develop a water management plan that will be subject to DEP approval. Based upon our ongoing conversations with DEP regulators, we know that DEP will require Brockton to draw additional water from Aquaria to lessen our impact on Silver Lake. It is likely that in future years, our annual payments to Aquaria will exceed $8 million per year. We look forward to your review in July of the proposed purchase of the Aquaria desal plant. While some have said that we cannot afford to buy the Aquaria plant, Quite the opposite is true. We cannot afford not to buy it. And that is why the Brockton Water Commission has favorably recommended the Aquaria purchase by a unanimous 5-0 vote. Council is looking at the FY18 sewer budget. You will note that I have recommended moving $1 million of sewer revenues into sewer purchase of service. This is the initial step toward shutting down our aging sludge incinerator. As we anticipate air quality standards continuing to toughen, and we project that the incinerator will require additional capital investment, it is time to stop burning sewer sludge in Brockton. Shutting down the sludge incinerator will give us cleaner air to breathe and an improved quality of life for Brockton residents, particularly on the south side of the city. And finally, we continue to improve the city's financial health despite all of the fiscal challenges that we face. 3 years ago, when I submitted my first city budget, the stabilization or rainy day fund stood at $2.4 million. Today, we have about $5.4 million, but the FY18 budget in front of you that I submitted this evening adds an additional $1 million to stabilization, bringing the balance to $6.4 million, $4 million more than 3 years ago. This budget also increases the Chapter 324 reserve to almost $6.3 million, up from $5 million 3 years ago. So from the FY15 budget to tonight's FY18 budget, we've added about $5 million to our total reserves. And I'm pleased to announce to you tonight, as a clear indicator of our improving financial health, that Standard & Poor's has removed the negative outlook from our bond rating and affirmed our AA rating. In addition, just this morning, S&P again reaffirmed its rating and stable outlook on the city's long-term bonds and also issued its rating of SP1+ for short-term bonds the city will be selling this month to finance temporarily our LED streetlight program, our facilities master plan, and the conclusion of our school rehabilitation projects. I'll quote from you from this morning's S&P report, quote, "The short-term rating reflects our view that Brockton maintains a very strong capacity to pay principal and interest when notes come due." Thank you for your attention.